How often have you watched a speaker captivate an audience? All the time. Was it compelling content, dynamic delivery? Did the message speak to you directly? Have you ever been that speaker? After listening to Patricia Fripp's presentation, whether you present to 1 or 1,000, you will know specific ways to become more polished, powerful, and professional. She is a Hall of Fame keynote speaker, executive speech coach, and sales presentation skills expert. The National Speakers Association elected her their first female president. Meetings and Conventions magazine named her one of the top 10 most electrifying speakers in North America. Kiplinger's Personal Finance magazine wrote that the 6th best way to invest in your success is to learn presentation skills from Patricia Fripp. Patricia is now virtually everywhere with her interactive virtual training, Fripp VT's powerful, persuasive presentations. And to discuss, fellow Toastmasters and guests, please welcome our keynote speaker, Patricia Fripp.
Introductions do a marvelous job at telling the audience who you are now at this point in your career. However, when I first joined Toastmasters, I was a hairstylist. I was a men's hairstylist. It was 1975. Will you raise your hand if you were not born before 1975? You learn from your experience. However, it's a lot faster and more cost-effective and timely if you learn from other people's experience. I ran my own men's hairstyling salon, and I loved that business as much as I love speaking. I'll never forget the first time I met Larry Mariottini. It was 10:45 on a Tuesday in 1972. I walked into the lobby of this very shishi men's hairstyling salon where I worked, and there he sat, looking most uncomfortable. Someone had said to him, "You need Miss Fripp." Well, he didn't know if he needed Miss Fripp, but he was there. Larry Mariottini was a computer programmer for Levi Strauss. I guess you might say Larry was a nerd. Long before I knew what one was, or realized I would want to grow up and be one. I took him back to my booth. I shampooed, conditioned, cut, style sprayed, and fluffed his hair. He looked good. He didn't know he looked good, but he looked good. He walked out of my salon with a bag of shampoo, conditioner, hairspray, hairbrush, never spent so much money in a barber shop in his entire life. And he went back to work at Levi Strauss. As he walked in, oh, the women said, "Larry." He went home and his wife said, "Larry." We can imagine after a few days of this positive response, he realized he did look good. And as what usually happens when you improve one aspect of your appearance or life or presentation, it has a tendency to spread. With Larry's new confidence, he joined a gym, worked out, trimmed down, bought some trendier clothes, and started acting in a more outgoing way. So much so that Levi Strauss offered him a sales position, even though he had no prior sales experience. Larry Mariottini turned out to be the best salesperson in his division. They cut his territory 5 times, and he still sold more than everybody else. In fact, out of his office, he sold more than some stores. Now, I know what you're thinking. This Fripp woman wants to take full credit for transforming this man's life, getting a better paid job, and shall we say more attention at home. Well, obviously Larry had something to do with it, but consider this. Every day when I went to work as a hairstylist, I could have looked at my job one of two ways. Either one, I've got 16 heads of hair to cut, or as I chose to, I have the opportunity to positively impact 16 people's lives. And our philosophy for our salon, what I trained my staff, was it's more than a haircut at Miss Fripp's. It's a motivational experience. We want to help you feel good as well as look good. And I know that worked because often people would say, I didn't really need a haircut, but I did need to feel good. So that was how I started my career. I was traveling nationwide for a hair product company, doing seminars, and I realized that if people come to watch you cut hair and learn styling techniques for 4 hours, you actually have to tell them something else while you're cutting hair. And I know this will surprise you, but what set me apart from the other stylists who were great stylists, I could cut hair and talk constantly for 4 hours. I could do that before Toastmasters. Can you imagine what happened after Toastmasters? And the talking part was so popular that the company that I was working for said, well, let's do a second morning that's just about business and sales and motivation. And then, of course, all my clients, executives just like you, were saying, oh, well, if you're speaking, Patricia, come speak at my staff meeting, come speak to my Rotary Club. And that is what got me from behind the chair to where we are, with a wonderful career. But I promise you, I loved cutting hair as much as I love speaking. But after 25 years behind a hairstyling chair, it was time to step out onto the stage. So let's go to last year. The email said, Dear Patricia, I am a big fan of yours. May I interview you for my blog? Well, I don't know about you, but I am a short-term project person. And I was involved creating my virtual training, which was a long-term project. And I was doing my very best to not be distracted. So I was about to send my standard at the time, thrilled to be interviewed, flattered, would love to, call me in 3 months email. And before I hit send, I thought, well, I'll check his website. So I picked up the phone. You now know I am dreadfully shallow. I picked up the phone and said, what is an Emmy award-winning TV interviewer and game show host doing being my fan? Well, we had a wonderful conversation for 30 minutes, and he said, Patricia, this is fabulous. This is enough for 3-4 blog posts. But now, come on, tell me. What is the #1 secret of giving a powerful, persuasive presentation? He said, oh, yes, no. And then it hit me. And I realized a brand new Frippicism was about to fall flawlessly from my lips. Although there is no one secret, if there were, it would be that your subject is of interest to your audience. Speaking at a Toastmaster conference, as we are, and as I have the honor to, and thank you for the invitation, is cheating. Because the fact that you are in Toastmasters means that you are interested in improving your presentation skills. The fact that you inconvenienced yourself, you made the conscious choice, you invested your money, and you came, proves you're interested in the subject. However, you know, in real life, outside of the situations where people actually go to an event about your subject, that often people are sent. Their boss might say, go to that training program, be fixed. Or words to that effect. So in the tough situations, now you also do it where they are interested, but this is the secret. You speak as an audience advocate. In other words, you look at your subject from the point of view, why would they care? What's in it for them? What are their interests? And for those of you who are developing your skills to go beyond Toastmasters, you cannot write a new speech every time you speak if you speak over 100 times a year. Not to have the same caliber. It is best, at least at the beginning, to develop a body of work that can vary depending on the audience and what their point of view. So presentation skills for salespeople, presentation skills for leaders, presentation skills for Toastmasters, presentation skills to promote your business will be the same content perhaps, or segments of your content, because obviously the longer the speak, the more you have to say, but from their point of view. And one way you can communicate that you are interested in them is very simply, put your words of what you say under a magnifying glass. Because my whole approach is, if you are a good speaker who wants to get great, you put what you do and how you say it under the magnifying glass to get a closer look. And you will see this specifically in part 2 of this presentation, where I invite willing volunteers. You do not push people up here who don't want to come. Willing volunteers, and you will just deliver a couple of lines, the beginning of a presentation, and we'll put it under the magnifying glass and see how a word, a pause, a gesture, an emphasis, or a movement can take a good presentation and make it great. And that's when you see these principles in action. We will look at, how do you connect to your audience? How do you open your presentation with more impact? There are options, because the first 30 seconds and the last 30 seconds have the most impact. You've got to come out and grab the audience, especially those who don't know that they want to be in your audience. Stories. Couple of techniques on how you can make your good stories great, and how to add specificity which will build your credibility. So when we start by looking at how can you speak as an audience advocate, how can you speak from their point of view, make sure that you watch the I versus you balance. So for example, I do not recommend you say, I am going to talk about. Instead, what you will hear, what you will learn, make it just you focused, and do it consistently, not just occasionally or one. Do it consistently. And the only way you can know how often you're doing it is to record yourself and listen. And if you have a presentation that you frequently deliver, I would take a live in action, not an edited to put on YouTube, a raw actual what came out of your mouth, and have it transcribed. And yellow highlight all the I's and see, is there a way you can rephrase that sentence to make it you-focused? And some of the best, greatest, most highly paid speakers often make this mistake.
Thank you. I have to tell you, I'm both challenged and excited. My excitement is I get a chance to give something back. My challenge is the shortest seminar I usually do is 50 hours. I'm not exaggerating. I do weekends, and what I do more than that, obviously, coach people, but I'm into immersion, because how'd you learn language? You didn't learn it by just learning principles. You got in it, and you did it so often that it became real. And the bottom line of why I'm here, besides being crazy mofo, is that I'm really in a position, I'm not here to motivate you, obviously. You don't need that. And a lot of times, that's what people think I do, and it's the furthest thing from it. What happens, though, is people say to me, well, I don't need any motivation. And I say, well, that's interesting. That's not what I do. I'm the why guy. I don't know why you do what you do. What is your motive for action? What is it that drives you in your life today, not 10 years ago, or are you running the same pattern? Because I believe that the invisible force of internal drive activated is the most important thing in the world. I'm here because I believe emotion is the force of life. All of us here have great minds. You know, most of us here have great minds, right? I don't know if I'm in the category, but we all know how to think. And with our minds, we can rationalize anything, we can make anything happen.
In all fairness, you could take anyone's first 1 minute, have it transcribed, and find ways to improve it. However, I'm suggesting, and certainly we know that Tony Robbins is the most famous, probably the most best read, most quoted, and richest speaker in North America. However, there is a lesson, and if you want to become a better speaker, start thinking like a speech coach. I would say, Tony, great speaker as he is, as you heard him say, I am used to delivering 50-hour seminars. And these are to people who fly to a location, probably spend $4,000 to $6,000, and they are pre-sold before they go. At a TED Talk, your audience would be there whether you were on the program or not, because there are plenty of other speakers, and you have 12 to 15 minutes to get your message across. You cannot ever get up in a format you are not used to working in and think, I'm so seasoned I can get up and start talking. Obviously, I am not Tony Robbins' speech coach. However, if I were looking at what we would say, how about starting this way? Why do you do what you do? What drives you? What is your motive for action? It's in his presentation. It's just let's get to the point and make it you-focused. Now you're more likely to engage the audience from the very beginning. Would you agree? Feel free to say amen.
Amen.
Good, I like that. Anytime you hear anything that resonates, please do it. Good. So again, can you see if you put your own words under the magnifying glass, you could see. So remember the yellow highlighter. There are other areas that you are going to yellow highlight from. Remember, it's a transcription. It's not a script of what you're going to say. Because there are always three speeches. The one you plan to deliver, the one that actually came out, and then with review, how the next one is going to get better. And the speeches might change, the subjects might change, the audience might change, the principles will never change. Principles have been around since we started communicating with each other. The first 30 seconds, the last 30 seconds have the most impact. And of course, a lot of my work is with executives and sales teams and brilliant individuals in Silicon Valley. And without exception, these wonderful, smart people who are usually okay once they get going with what their expertise is, without exception, they all need help with how they open and conclude. So let us look at how You might have some ideas, techniques, suggestions to take your presentations, try something new, or if you have a presentation that you give regularly, which if you go beyond Toastmasters you will have, and if you're delivering it often, find a way to fall in love with your own content and open it a different way. So most professionals find when they get started, very few know how to open and conclude. Welcome to You Have Choices, Options of Openings, the Techniques. As you soon will come to discover, our subtitle is How to Open Your Presentation with Impact. At the beginning of a speech, presentation, seminar, client meeting, report to senior management, sales presentation, or any manner of presentation you deliver, you need to arouse interest in the subject. After all, we stand in the rain to see a movie. Would you stand in the rain to listen to your presentation? Do you think they would? Let's see how we can make that happen. You can start with a question. Raise your hand if any of your speeches ever start with, have you ever? Great. Write down this one word, often. Because if you say, have you ever stood up to speak and words didn't come out of your mouth? Or have you ever walked in a room of strangers you genuinely wanted to meet and didn't know how to initiate a conversation? You see, if you did it once and lived through it, we don't need your advice. However, if you say, how often have you stood up to speak and not known how to open your presentation? How often have you walked into your manager and been terrified to deliver bad news? How often have you walked into a room of strangers to network and didn't know how to start a conversation? You see, if it is a situation you are frequently in, they really need your advice. So would you agree adding one word to that question could make it more impactful? Amen. Good, I love it. I'm coming back to Texas. Use a rhetorical question, and any of these actual lines feel free to use. If I were to ask you, if I were to ask you, is 2017 the year you absolutely transformed the quality of your presentations? Perhaps you would say yes. Perhaps you'd say no. Most likely you would say, Patricia, I would love it to be. Can you tell me how? Well, let's roll up our sleeves, and in the next 45 minutes, you will learn 3 specific ways. Can you see from your opening you transition? And especially if it is a workshop or a hands-on, I recommend you say, let's roll up our sleeves. That means we're going to get to work. And if you are walking into a cold audience, and by a cold audience, these people who were sent or didn't choose to be there, if you ask a question that you want a response and they do not respond, perspiration run down the back. You see, the opening of a presentation has 2 purposes if it works. One, engage the audience. Oh, this is going to be better than I thought. Oh, what an interesting approach. Oh, hey, I'm going to try that opening. It also serves, when it works, to boost your confidence. Because I do not care how seasoned you are. I first got paid to speak in 1976. Full-time since 84. And I would love to tell you, all 3,000 plus presentations I've had the privilege to deliver have been a wild success. That's not true. I don't care how good you are. it's not true. Sometimes it's you, sometimes it's the situation, sometimes the audience. And one time, I will regale you with my disasters, and the opening line usually is, "The audience was drunk." Which is now, never invite me to speak after dinner. The answer is no, Miss Fripp does not speak in the evening. So you can start with a question. An interesting statistic or little-known fact. And I promise you, in many of your presentations, it is in the body of your speech. Bring it up. And then, if it is an interesting statistic or a little-known fact, you might want to add an emotion. Would it interest you to know that? Would it surprise you to know that? Would it amaze you to know? Would it horrify you? Would it disgust you? And you think, how would you use those? In a speech I just helped one of my executives, it was a 3-minute speech acceptance for an award for the work she'd done with this organization. And her opening was, would it horrify you to know that the San Francisco Bay Area is the 3rd largest population for modern day slavery? Now that gets your attention. If you are helping an organization that helps young women and girls, nothing like shocking you to open your wallet. So there are times you want to shock your audience. It might interest, it amaze. But that is a way, because if you start with your statistic at the beginning, you need to bring people in and let them know they're going to hear something. So what would it interest me? And so whatever the emotion is, you've got to pause so they can think, oh, what? Let us be realistic, especially as we want to speak from an audience advocacy point of view. People look at the program and start making judgments about the speaker. Now, just as a matter of interest, please raise your hand if before this conference you never heard of me, you have no idea who Patricia Fripp is, you would have come to the conference anyway. Good, keep your hand up. You've never seen me on YouTube, never heard Darren LaCroix talk about me, or Craig Valentine, or Ed Tate, or any of my world champion buddies. Good, I love you. You are Frippy virgins. You've never heard anything I've said. Everything is brand new and fresh. I was speaking to 350 Seventh-day Adventist pastors. The subject was how to design and deliver a more charismatic sermon. So we have to understand, what would the audience be thinking? She's the only person on the program who isn't a minister. How can anyone who isn't a minister tell me how to write a better sermon? I write one every week. I bet she isn't a Seventh-day Adventist, which I'm not. Now, obviously, they would be generous enough, and I hope those of you who had no idea who the guest speakers were at this conference, you're generous enough to think somebody would not have put them on the program if they weren't worth our time. However, can you imagine the impact a good opening can have to raise your credibility? And in that case, I chose perhaps an interesting statistic or little-known fact from their world, not mine. And this is how I opened. 465 times in the Bible, it said it came to pass. It did not say it came to stay. And unless your sermon is well constructed, artfully crafted, and charismatically delivered, it will not come to stay in the hearts, minds, and lives of your congregation. Now, in that case, I had 350 Seventh-day Adventists say, Amen. A story or example. Stories are a great way to start. Now, if you're reporting to your senior management, I don't suggest you start with a story. I suggest you say, the purpose of our meeting is, or thank you for the opportunity to update you. Get to the point if you're talking to your senior manager. But a story, and we will go into more details with how you can perfect your stories in a moment. A statement. This is a statement of your opinion on the subject. For example, it never ceases to amaze me that intelligent, well-educated and ambitious individuals frequently overlook developing the number one skill that is absolutely guaranteed to position them the head of the crowd. Namely, developing the ability to stand up and speak eloquently with confidence, or at very least stagger to their feet and say anything at all. Because the farther up the corporate ladder you go, the more important your presentation skills become. And it is much better to develop the skills before you have the title, position, salary, and respect you want. Because presentation skills will get you there a lot faster. And this is why we love Toastmasters. It'll help you as a leader. Amen. Yeah, good. It helps you with your leadership, as all your leaders will tell you. As much as they contribute, they grow in their own lives as well while serving. Transport the audience to a different time and place. Now, you can do that by saying, imagine. You can transport the audience to the future. For example, today is May the 7th, 6th, May the 6th. May the 6th, 2017. What you could do is say, imagine it is May the 6th, 2018. And as you get ready for work, you take a moment to reflect as you're putting on the most expensive outfit you've ever owned. That this last year has been the most rewarding, the most financially successful. The year that you actually worked less and made more. And you take a moment to ponder, what happened? And then you remember, on May the 6th, 2017, you attended a Toastmaster conference. And you heard this dynamic. Short, pushy little English woman. Suggest that the higher up the corporate ladder you want to go, the more important your presentation skills will become. And you do not have time to learn just from your own experience. You have to learn from the experience of others who know more than you. You can also take the audience to a different time and place in the past. And it could be, let's go back to January the 15th, 1936. Or, as we reflect on last quarter's results, that is in the past, Now, as you will notice, when you are talking to the audience, if you are talking about the past, you either move or gesture to your right, the audience's left. That is the past. This is the present, this is the future. If it is 2018, I am going to move to my left, your right, because that's how we read. And you say, well, I wasn't aware of that rule. I bet my audiences don't know. And they probably don't. However, if I was to walk this way and say, imagine it's 2018, even though you don't know the principle, the rule, you haven't heard it, there is so much of communication, you feel there's something wrong, even though you don't know what it is. So the more we can incorporate these tiny suggestions that in isolation might not make that much difference. However, practice consistently together. That's when people say, I always thought you're the best speaker in our company, but wow, that was amazing. They don't know the difference, you do. Because you've learned the principles that are universal. So let us put under the magnifying glass your words. And that is, remember, what we're going to do in the next section. So next, let's look at stories. We all know if you are going to be a good speaker, you have to have good stories. Robert McKee, the screenwriting teacher, said stories are the creative conversion of life itself into a more powerful, clearer, more meaningful experience. Now, will you raise your hand if you've ever heard my friend Darren LaCroix? Good. Well, Darren and I have given many seminars together, and what Darren says, and it's absolutely true and worth reinforcing, that when you tell a story, you are not going to lie. You do not make it up. If it's a tall tale, maybe, but in general, in a real speech, what you are going to do is like a movie, shrink what might have been 3 months' conversations into one. You have to be emotionally true. Often in business, we talk about our clients and we can't actually mention their names. Many of my clients can't mention their names. So you might say it is a 2,000-person manufacturing company in Cleveland. It might actually be a 2,000-person tech company in Silicon Valley. But the principle's the same. It's 2,000 people, and that's the point of the story, the size. Stories are great because we see them different ways. So as you hear a story, you might not hear the same as somebody else. Stories are good because the audience, especially when we do it masterfully, see what we're saying. You can do that with a sentence, but you can especially do it with a story. How often have you sat in an audience and been mesmerized by a speaker? Was it their compelling content? Were their stories scintillating? Do they have the ability to reach out and grab you in a way you thought, wow, the speaker is talking just to me? Be honest. How many life-changing, career-building, or awe-inspiring presentations have you heard? Have you ever been that speaker? What would it mean to you and your career if you had that ability? I guarantee if you've heard a good speech, sermon, or business presentation that you enjoyed and remembered, at least one reason that made it memorable was the stories. Everybody loves a good story, and that is part of their power. No matter what our culture, we grow up feeling that hearing a story is somehow a reward. Stories are how we learn values and our family's legacy. When we're in school, stories make history come alive. In business, we quickly discover that stories help us explain complex issues and are the best way to connect to co-workers, customers, and audiences of all sizes and makeup. Wise leaders, managers, sales professionals, professional speakers, consultants, trainers, in fact, anybody with ambition who wants to make a difference will do well to develop an arsenal of great stories. These stories will provide clear, dramatic examples. No matter what position or level you find yourself, good stories help differentiate you from your competition. Good stories that are interesting, memorable, and illustrate your message can inspire and motivate, train and teach, convince and persuade. And one way that you can get better is to incorporate this very simple formula. As in the next session, I was at a National Speakers Association chapter, and I invited people to come up to deliver the opening of the presentation. The woman came up and said, "My dad walked into a diner, looked at the waitress, and thought, that's my wife," in 1946. I said, "I'm sure this is a great story, and maybe you're the result of this. However, you need to present it a different way. Start with the time. In 1946, this puts the story into context. You know it's in the past. When I told you about Larry Mariottini, it was very important, 10:45 on a Tuesday in 1972. I don't want you to be elbowing your neighbor saying, oh, is she still a hairdresser? I want you to know that was in the past. This was not last week. In 1946, you do not have to be born in 1946 to know this was the end of World War II. You have seen movies. You have seen theme restaurants. You know what the diner looks like. You have heard stories from your parents and your grandparents. You've learned in history. You have an idea of what life was like in America. I know I was born at the end, right after World War II in England, and I remember being on ration books. You know, we all have experiences even if we heard them. We have very strong impressions. So I don't know about you, but I see her dad as a soldier. He's in uniform. And I have an emotional connection to anyone who serves our country in any branch of the armed forces. Amen. In fact, if you have served, if you are married to someone who has served, would you like to stand and be acknowledged? Thank you for your service. So I know, just from my picture, not what she said, but I know her dad has had experience he will never tell his future wife and children about. He will never talk to his civilian friends about. Even when he's with his comrades, they acknowledge the experience, but they probably don't talk about it. I just know that from my Uncle Bill, who was shot down in war started for Britain on September the 7th, 39, and on October the 16th, my Uncle Bill was shot down over Germany and spent the entire World War II in prisoner of war camps. He was in Stalingrad 3 with The Great Escape and has been back since then with the BBC and had several TV shows about it. He did not talk about that experience ever to 2001. And I said to his children, the first time we were looking through albums and I was hearing the story, I said to his kids, have you ever heard these stories? No. My dad, my mother, never heard any of the stories. And once he started talking, he never stopped. He was giving speeches at 98 and was fabulous. Everyone said, how can he remember these details? And he looked at a photograph once with my brother. There were 46 of his friends from one of the camps, and he was so upset. There was one name he couldn't remember. Unbelievable. So my point is, in Hollywood, and for fun, I've taken a lot of screenwriting classes. Not that I have any talent or interest in being a screenwriter, but Hollywood knows how to tell a good story. And we can learn from Hollywood. And what Hollywood does with the characters, because even some of the bad characters, how can you connect to a mobster? But what they do is they write rooting principles that makes us like the characters, even if they're basically bad guys. Well, in my mind, just because I see him as a soldier, I'm rooting for him to get whatever he wants. That's an emotional connection. So he walks into the restaurant, he's alone, so I think, he walks in the diner, I think he sat at the counter, because he's alone. And we looked at the waitress, and I know what she looked like. She's blonde, had a little cap, pinny over her dress, thick, rimply sole shoes, because she stood up 7, 8, 9 hours a day and still kept smiling. And I bet she said, would you like some pie and coffee, honey? And he thought, that's my wife. All by starting with 1946. So you see, if you follow the formula, when, where, who, what happens, it just puts the story in a context so it's easier for us to grasp and get to the point fast. When, where, who, what happened. If you tweet at Fripp, we have to populate our stories with flesh and blood characters that the audience can relate to. Now, I know we work on our own personal stories, but you don't always have to have stories that you are the hero of or the main character. Now, most of my stories, I was there, I participated, I observed, I heard. Stories are always about people and what they say. So again, if you are looking to a transcript of what came out of your mouth, look at, underline all the time. And a time can be a date, a time can be today, a time can be at this seminar. Move it to the beginning of the sentence. Because what is at the end is most important. And this comes from comedy. Take my wife, please. There's a setup phrase, a punch word or punch phrase that triggers the laugh. In business communication, think of it as a setup phrase and an impact phrase. Then we need to use specificity because specificity builds credibility. There is an epidemic traveling around the country. I find it in every company, no matter how sophisticated. Every speaker, no matter how highly paid. Every Toastmaster. Sloppy language. I do a lot of virtual coaching where I'm coaching engineers and executives in Zoom. So I see them, they see me. And if I hear the word STUFF, which is rubbish and debris, I say, put up your hand. I want to see you slap your hand. Because if I was in person, I would slap it for them. I don't care if it's the chief financial officer at McDonald's. You slap your hand if you use that naughty word. Because, and this is the principle, we do not improve what we're not aware of. So as you look at the transcript of what actually came out of your mouth, look at if you say the word STUFF. Now, in everyday conversation, there's no agenda. You are more likely to be non-specific. So I'm not going to slap you if you say things, because you don't have time to think what you really mean. However, what is the difference between a presentation and a conversation? A conversation is not planned. It's just back and forth. A presentation, even if in a business environment where, hey, can you come up and give me a report? You got 10 minutes or 2 floors to come give a report. Always think exactly how you're going to open, what is the big idea I want to get across, and what's your walk away line. But you are basically, you don't have a script. It's just an update. Most of our communication is unplanned and frequent, or we have very little time to get it together. Therefore, that means to improve our more formal presentations or reports to our boss or updates with our team, we need to build good habits in our everyday communication. Because when you step on the stage, you want to sound conversational. However, be tighter and more specific because you had time to think through it. And the question I ask most of my clients is, specifically, what do you mean by things? I work in Silicon Valley. A lot of my most intelligent, smartest clients, English is their second or third language. And although they speak and write English, if you are not very specific, it is too difficult for them to exactly know what you're talking about. Certainly, with the odd sentence, they might have the whole flow. But if we are communicating important communications, it really is helpful if we speak to be remembered so that they can repeat what we said. Very often we are speaking for the audience of our audience. We work with sales teams. They're going to deliver their message. Well, they might not get a yes for 3-4 months, in some cases a year. So the team making the decision is going to be comparing what they said to maybe 3 or 4 other vendors. Isn't it better if they can remember what you said better than the others? That's why the presentation makes the difference. And you have to speak in shorter, more specific language. Pause so that people can digest. Do reviews. And speak visually as often as possible. Tons. I do not want you to go out and say, oh, I got tons of ideas from Miss Fripp. No, you had 2 pages of notes. If you had a ton of notes, you would not leave the ballroom. Weight, tons is weight. If you're not talking about weight, be specific. Now, my friend Darren LaCroix, you know Darren LaCroix? Let's hear my Darren fans. Because if you hear Darren, you're probably a fan. What he says, Fripp, is you always have to say in your speech, have you already received enough value that earns you that earns me the right to have 30 seconds to tell how your audience why you might like to take me home, or how you might like to take me home? Have I earned the right? Good. Wonderful. Well, if you liked what you heard and can imagine what it would be like to sit in a 2-day speaking school, to have all the ideas on how you find content, structure your presentation, open with impact, develop your stories, adapt it to the business environment as well as Toastmasters, perhaps you would like to take my 2-day speaking school home with you, and just so you can watch Fripp in action, you can drive and listen, but to watch me in action, the value pack of how to create your keynote faster than you think, 8 ways to open with impact, and of course 50 Shades of Fripp. 50 Shades of Fripp. Because your guest speaker has actually been working, not as a speaker, but working for more than 50 years. This is when you say, tell me it's not true. All right, let's do it again. Your speaker has been working for more than 50 years. Better. And that's the advice that I've received, the lessons that I've learned, and some of the experiences put together in what is a good framework of a presentation that would help you with your presentations. So if you would like to take me home, I have able assistants and a nice little bag. Now on your chair or your seat, there is a form that what you would do, you'd give us your name, your email, your phone number, your credit card number. I promise you, it is put in a little bag. As soon as we run it, it's shredded. No one will see it except me and my able assistants who will make sure we can read your handwriting, and will give you a bag. So and the bag will say, take Fripp home. Just as my banner says, take Fripp home, you know you want to. You remember Larry Mariottini? What day of the week did I first meet him? What time was the appointment? I described the salon I worked in a word you probably never use. What is it? Shishi. What did he do for a living? At the beginning of the story, yes, he was IT. But in the end, after I transformed his appearance, he, of course, sold jeans. Yes. How many times did they cut his territory? What did the women in the office at Levi Strauss say? What did his wife say? How long did it take before he realized maybe I look pretty good? See the power of the story? They may not remember everything, however, they will remember some of the details. This is the power of stories. Now, naturally, when you are a professional speaker, and you have your favorite stories, sometimes you wonder, well, I wonder if they see it exactly the way you do. 4 years ago, I was speaking in the Bay Area at a Toastmaster conference like this. I told the Larry Mariottini story. And a good-looking, red-headed district governor came up and said, after he got divorced, I dated Larry Mariottini. And he told me the same story. He said, you cut off his Elvis Presley sideburns and you did transform his life. She said, do you know where he is now? He said, no, and I've really tried to find him. She said, I'm going to get him. I'm going to go out and find him. And would you believe, as fate would have it, that day we had the conversation, his kids had put up a Facebook page for him. She tracked him down. We got reconnected. And that was when I'm older, I'm more sophisticated. I said, Larry, how did you actually do that? And he said, well, I had set up all the inventory systems and the tracking. So not only did I understand all the systems, once I had the confidence to actually talk to people and sell, I mean, I could just manage everything. I was just so much more organized and efficient than everybody else. He said they kept wanting to promote me, but I didn't want to. I'd make less money. And it was then he told me, I sold more in my little office than some stores. And of course, he moved from the Bay Area, which one of the reasons Levi Strauss didn't know where he was. And I would like to tell you, he retired and moved to Texas. And he is standing at the back of the room and wants to meet you. I would like to tell you that. However, he actually moved to Chicago. Got you. So what you have just seen is the circular technique. You start with a story and you end up with the next part of the story of the same idea or the philosophy. And I apologize, but you did, let's face it, you did enjoy thinking, maybe he's here. That's me as a little girl with my brother who is 1 year, 1 month, 2 days, 12.5 hours younger than I am. I grew up to be a hairstylist and a speaker. He grew up to be a famous rock and roll guitarist. I don't know if you're familiar with Robert Fripp, the guitarist of King Crimson, played on David Bowie's Heroes. Well, that is my brother. And if you want to shake me by the left hand, because Jimi Hendrix came up to my brother and shook him by the left hand and said, "It's closest to my heart." And I hope you will always remember me and perhaps take a bag of my goodies and be back nice and early for our second session. Always remember, certainly I want you to remember me, but one of the reasons we go to conferences like this is to learn. So I want you to frequently reinforce ideas that are productive and profitable. Go teach somebody else what you think you learned. We'll see you in 15.